Hello, hello. I feel like I need to create some kind of a show intro, but then at the same time I'm like I don't want to do all the work of having to have this intro. So I'm just going to ramble every time that I start a new show. So 99 Dev Problems as usual because everyone I talk to is just phenomenal. This conversation has been a very desired conversation for me and I've been looking forward to it. Claire and I have been had the chance to speak online on the internet and just sort of share notes. We very much have similar methodologies around engaging developers and just all the things that we got to talk about in the pre-show, which we'll talk about again on the show. And so this one I think is just exciting for that reason of we have never had the chance face to face or one to one to be able to engage, and so it's just a blessing, honestly, to be able to do this morning. So, Claire, I would love to give you the spotlight here and allow you to introduce yourself, share whatever it is you want to share, personal life, professional life, whatever you got on your heart.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. And yeah, as you said, we've exchanged social messages for a long time, but never actually managed to do this. So this is great from my side as well. Yeah, I'm currently a VP of engineering at a company called Odin. But one of the things I think potentially more interest to this audience is a side project I've got running with a good friend and co-founder called Sailhouse.dev, which has got more of the DevRel, the DevTools thing aspect to it, which is something I know pretty well from having worked at GitHub and Netlify in my past. Loving learning about all the VC space in my day job, but yeah, still got a huge passion for developer tooling, especially now as I'm doing more coding again, not only with the side project because AI and everything. And yeah, in terms of personal life, I like to lift up heavy things and then put them down again, because what else do you do when you pick them up?
Oh my gosh, I love that. I think I need to make that one of my hobbies is picking heavy things up and putting it back down again because I claim that my farm chores are enough of a workout to actually help, me be healthy and grow and whatever, but it's not. It's really not. And so I need to work out.
Tougher than you know from what I know of people that do that kind of stuff. You've got functional fitness.
That's true. And it was actually funny because I was just at lunch with someone yesterday where we were talking about the differences between strength, right? Is there's visual where you look strong and there's actual strength. And I'm not saying that, sometimes you're lucky enough to look strong when you have actual strength, right? It just depends on your body type. But just how different that is. My husband is I'm not going to say the word. This is a whole side joke, but I accidentally said a very feminine word and called him that. I called him petite one time and it was just it did not land well. I've already learned, to any men listening, I've already learned, I apologized. I figured out what my mistake was. Long story short, he is the same height as me and he is a smaller man. I am attracted to that. And so I thought that was a positive. He did not like it. But coming back around, he doesn't look muscly, right? Because he is more of a smaller stature. So anyways, all of bringing that back to lifting, I think is a really cool hobby. Do you do anything with competitions or anything like that? Or is it just something you just really enjoy doing?
Both, because you have to kind of learn, you have to love the process, much
Sure.
like engineering, honestly. You don't put the time in or the effort in. But yeah, I've been competing in powerlifting for the last couple of years now. Kind of just decided post-pandemic, life's too short, let's do things. So, yeah, why not?
I love that sentiment. Did you want to do it pre-COVID and sort of were maybe it's not right for me or?
Maybe a little bit. I've done a bit of Olympic lifting and powerlifting. I used to do a lot more kettlebell sport, but I got bored of the process of that. It wasn't helpful in terms of sticking to training. And then when I got back into things again, I'm like, I'm going to do something I want to do. That's the first thing. And then I'm like, I really do like things to aim for. And whilst I do obviously aim for personal bests as we go along, going and testing yourself is a whole other thing, because then you've got adrenaline and nerves. And other people lifting really well around you is seeing, obviously I compete in with other women, seeing other older women lift heavy stuff is just yes.
Oh, I feel the same way. I shoot archery and honestly, I need to pull my bow out. It's probably been a few months, but I shoot archery and I feel the same way, right? It's just this level of empowerment of I am a woman, hear me roar, even though it's with a weapon, but I still feel powerful,
Yeah. And yeah, it's the satisfaction that I did it, that I get out of it, rather than that, it's not like I have to win. I'm not one of those. It's I lifted the best I could lift. That's what I'm after.
It pushes you to be your best.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so many things I can unpack, but I think before we start to unpack that, because like Netlify, GitHub, those are obviously companies developers love. And so I'm sure they'd love to hear about that. But before we get to that, let's start with how'd you get started, right? So as a kid, were you into technology? Did you go to college for technology? What was sort of the like origination of how you got to where you are today?
Well, originally I wanted to be an architect, as in like buildings and stuff,
Amazing. Yes.
because I loved my technical drawing, which was pencil and paper back when I was at school still. I mean, CAD existed, but you didn't get it in schools.
Sure.
And yeah, and then something kind of changed. I mean, we have A levels in the UK, which is the thing that just predates going to university slash college.
Hmm.
And when I was choosing those, I ended up sort of falling into technology. My dad had got one of the Amstrad computers at home in the early days, revealing my age there slightly, but he'd been into tech in like he used to work on mainframes, and it wasn't I never
Wow.
wanted to follow that path. But when he had it home and I started tinkering and coding and even just playing games and stuff, I'm like, I can do this. I enjoy doing this. And then, yeah, it sort of all changed in the 2 years before I went to university, and so that's when I made the switch. And then then I was the only woman on my degree course. That's how. Yeah, there was like 70 of us, and there were like 69 men.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you had someone saying hello. I'm gonna pop that
Hey,
in.
Joanna. It's been a while.
Yes. It's actually it's this is gonna sound bad, but it's like nice to hear someone else was in the same boat, right? The very first time I went to a conference and was actually speaking, I didn't expect this to be the case, but like came in and I was literally the only woman there, the only woman doing anything, attending, speaking at all, and I was like, okay. But my entire life, I've really gravitated to like racing and fishing and hunting and shooting archery. And so I'm not saying that they are stereotypical male hobbies, but I don't know. There's just something about that. And so I guess to me, I saw it as like a challenge of like, well, hear me roar again, like I am here. So I don't know how you felt about it, but it kind of got me down
Yeah,
a little bit, but I felt empowered.
I didn't. I kind of look back on it more with a different lens because while I was there, I was just like one of them in that sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and I totally, yeah, I was like not going to let that stop me. It never bothered
Hmm.
in the moment. But I know from talking to earlier in career people these days, like they would be horrified by that and walk away.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
I'm glad it's changed a bit. It's not great, but it has changed a bit.
Yeah. I do feel like it's less common, but I still feel like there can be, we'll even still see panels or conferences that are really heavy on male speakers when it's, something that's extremely technical. Hopefully they're trying efforts and things to expand
Well,
that, but
running through, I mean, it's true at senior leadership as well. That's why I loved some of the
uh-huh.
things at lead dev because obviously, like Lara Hogan, Mary Williams, Kate Houston, other people that are pretty well known were there. But I'd been previously I think it was in May, I'd been to a leadership panel, and yeah, there were 12 men and me.
Exactly. Exactly.
You can stop now.
Yeah, right, right. Oh, it's such an interesting thing. I think you are right because, when I think about it, it was very clear to me I was at a conference by myself as a woman, right? So like I was aware, but then at the same time it was sort of like, well, I'm here though. Like I'm going to do it. I'm going to just be me and be a part of this. And actually thinking about it, like it does break my heart to think if like someone were to come into that kind of a situation and see that and sort of walk out because there's just so much there's so much that can come from those hard situations, like it might feel weird, but it's like, what are you going to learn and pull out of that maybe is worth some of that discomfort?
Yeah, and I think also now I've gotten to the point, again, probably age related, where I will stand up for my own opinions and beliefs in these conversations. Because there was somebody there that was talking about, don't you miss the walk around management style? And I nearly had a hemorrhage or something out of stress because I'm like, even as an engineer, I hated it when managers did that. That is not good leadership.
Nope.
And I pretty much called it out, whereas I would not have done that a decade ago.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. Oh, see, you and I were like meant to be best friends. I'm so glad that we're getting to chat. This is so great.
Definitely.
Okay, so diving into sort of like the post education and all of that, like share what you'd like, but I think, listeners would probably love to hear about sort of your journey there and like maybe your time at GitHub and Netlify and some of the cool stuff you got to do.
Yeah.
But I'll leave that up to you to sort of chat about whatever you'd like. Maybe where did you go from sort of that educational path and realizing technology was for you to kind of where you are today?
Well, I stayed in education for a little bit because even back then I knew I didn't want all of the big consultancies straight from university, which
Yeah.
was the most common route into tech in the UK, at least at the time.
Hmm.
But then in the dot-com recovery era, I'd
Yep.
say, it was sort of 2004, 5, 6, there was more startups starting to appear again in the UK. And that's when I need the real world. I want to build stuff. I want to be, I don't know, part of stuff. So that
Yep.
was when I went into my first startup, and I was very green, like most people are when they get their first jobs. And then I went to another company where it was more kind of developers were given more freedom, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to come up with solutions and stuff, and that worked for me.
Yeah.
And I grew really well there, and I had a couple of great mentors there. Again,
Mm.
it's important for everybody, whatever stage of career, I think, if you can find the right ones. And then, a few different jobs, like sort of working my way up to being a senior, because that definitely took longer than 3 seconds, unlike in the era when we used to give out for nothing, pretty much. And then, I ended up at another startup where in the area we live now, and I was like the second engineer there, and that's when I got sales, which I mentioned because that's one of the skills I needed to get into GitHub. And I had, that was such a learning curve in a good way. Again, I like going the deep end for these things. And the CTO was technical, obviously, and then the first founding engineer, he was really generous with his time and teaching me things, and I learned a lot. He would definitely be what you call a staff or principal now in modern parlance. But and so and then I did some agency work because, again, to get the breadth, because I've always been about delivering a solution. It's never been tech for tech's sake. Does that make sense?
Absolutely does.
Yeah. And then I'm like, I was in another small company, and I'd kind of made myself redundant because I ended up being lead developer and working with the CEO, and like everything was running. I'm like, this is
Yep.
great. You don't need me now. And then I'm like, I need to test myself in something bigger. So that's when I applied for GitHub and was able to pass all the interview stuff and do live Rails coding, which probably now wouldn't be so great because I haven't done it in a long while. But and I was lucky enough to see a little bit of pre-acquisition GitHub as well as the early parts of post-acquisition, which was and I met so many amazing people there. Lorena, who said hi, being one of them, but others as well. It was fantastic, and also seeing what at the time was still a largish company moving at pace pre-acquisition.
Yep.
I know visibly they didn't always think that we weren't doing big splashy releases a la the big companies, so they hadn't learned that. But like .com was deployed tens of hundreds of times a day with small little incremental things, and you got to see all of that on scale, and it was really cool. And I kind of started my leadership journey there, but
Amazing.
I had to kind of make a move because I was never really suited for the Microsoft style of things. It was too big at that point. So I mean, it was very amicable. I chose to leave or anything. It wasn't anything dodgy, but I'm like, for my next step, I need to move. So I then went to another startup back in Britain, and they struggled, not because of me, hopefully. Well, no,
Maybe.
financial struggling. So and I'm like, again, it was, I can't do my best work here, and therefore I don't like being a drain. I don't just hang around for the sake of it. So I got the role at Netlify, and again, massive growth, personal growth there, as well as influencing some of the technology that's even being used now. So
That's
pretty cool. And
that
I
is
like. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I don't want to jump in until you're done. I just wanted to rebuttal with that is a very cool path, but keep going if you wanted to add to
And
that.
I'm just going to say again, the value of mentorship. Like, I really enjoyed working with my CTO, well, and the CEO, but like from a mentorship or sponsorship perspective, again, the CTO was great at Netlify, and yeah, now I'm kind of doing it on my own, as it were, at the startup plus the side project, because I don't like being bored. I'm not good being bored.
You and I are the same. It's really interesting. I don't know if you've ever had to do this, but have you had to leave a role because you were just bored?
Yes.
How do
Yeah.
you how did you explain it? Because I have done that and sometimes I just cannot eloquently explain like I was bored. I needed more challenges because it isn't necessarily something that is seen as a positive, even though I think it's a positive because it means that I've learned what I want to learn and I want to learn something else or push my skills in another way. So I've struggled to speak to that personally.
I've always phrased it in terms of challenge.
Mm,
Personally, and I would say from a business perspective, a bit like when I was the lead developer, like when I initially talked to the CEO, it wasn't like I quit. It was like,
yeah.
I don't think you need me anymore. This is why. And he was like, oh, because we had a good working relationship.
Yep.
But if he can better use that money for another developer or for non-developer or whatever it is, yeah. I mean, I think some of the agency work bored me in the end because it was the same thing for multiple different clients. But that's
Yep.
not why I then went and got a different. It was fair to say, I've done all of this. I've spent 4 years here. I've contributed. Just time for a change. And again, that wasn't an acrimonious situation at all.
Yep.
But yeah, definitely with that situation where I was like, I personally need a bigger challenge, and you could make better use of my resource, me as a resource, as it were, or whatever you want to do.
Yeah. That's such a powerful thing to be able to do too, right? Because it's like that's I'm not saying it's scary because maybe at the time it wasn't as a job market like it is today. That'd be really hard to do today because jobs are few and far between depending on exactly what you're looking for. But it's a really powerful thing to be able to identify your place in the business, right? And just seeing like, hey, I've sort of filled what I need. And I think that I don't know how you feel about it. You've had some great experience to speak to, but just kind of curious what you think is that a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of, but developers tend to come into a role and sort of just like narrow vision into here's my, work that I'm doing, here's what I'm going to produce, here's what I'm going to deliver, and not necessarily take that full lens view of, hey, here's actually what the business is looking to do. And I think it is a major differentiator for a technical person who can dive in and sort of deeply understand the business side of what they're actually building as well.
Yeah, I think there's a definite split there. I mean, I've heard it was never named this in the past, but I would say it was a trait that GitHub hired for when I was hired. I
Mm,
can't for now, but I would say now I'm seeing other companies talk about the product engineer. So again,
mhm.
on the problem or the product rather than tech for tech's sake. And
Yep.
you're right, there are some engineers who like literally want to be given a ticket, don't want to think, want to execute. But they're the people I worry about. Like, I'm really bullish on AI. I think it can unlock a lot of things, but they're the people that the agent can replicate that. They already are. And so for those sorts of people, I'd be more concerned in terms of you have human judgment. That is still not a thing that machines have.
Mhm.
If you stop a minute and go, this is costing this much money. Is it really value for money if it's a particular tool? Or if you're like, well, I've pushed that ticket up, but I don't like the UX, raise it. Don't just say shipped, done, whatever, kind of depends on the terminology of where you work and what tooling you use, but
For
it's
sure.
that kind of thing. And I will say also, I mean, being in leadership, you have to learn about the business, because
Mhm.
that's something else engineers don't always realize is my responsibility in my role at the moment, and even when I was at Netlify as a senior director, is to the business.
Mhm. Exactly.
Even though engineering is how my contribution happens indirectly.
Right, but I mean, it's in those roles though, right? Like you're in that leadership role because it's your job to work back in that business and to make sure that whatever's happening in engineering is being communicated to that board and whatever's happening in that board is being communicated back to your engineering team, right? You're that essential bridge. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
con-
that's it. Exactly. Exactly. Well, that almost like sort of speaks to I have so many things I want to ask you and and dive into, but kind of one little bit, and then we'll dive into what you're actually building with like Salehouse and kind of doing today. Is that in the pre-show we talked about learning yet another framework, right? Or learning yet another thing. And I had shared that, I have some like, I don't have per se angst about it, but I have just, there's this like, oh, I wish it wasn't as complicated as it is. Or maybe it's just my old way of thinking. But, when I became an engineer, it was like you had to understand the infrastructure, the actual coding stack, the whatever was happening from deployments, the testing, the servers, making sure everyone had the right local setup. It was just like you knew everything from start to finish because that's how you did it. There wasn't all these dev tools and other products out there to save you time, right? And so just want to pick up that conversation and talk about it here because I think it's really vital in how we operate today, right? And so bringing that business side of it into it, it really makes me feel like there's a lack there. If you don't understand that business, then how can you, again, in that type of a stack where everything is all over the place, how do you understand what's going on to actually solve something?
Well, indeed, that is a very good question, and I'm not sure that everybody always does. I mean, certain systems at scale are by the very nature of the scale have to be distributed systems, and they're hard to understand anyway. We know that. There's a bunch of literature on that. But yeah, if you've I say just, but running a back end and a front end separately even is a thing, how do you make sure the right things are happening? And then you start getting into observability and other stuff like that. But what we were talking about pre-show, and I think it's important to bring back in here, is I was saying about I get frustrated with local development when I can't spin a thing up, or a repo. You check out the repo, you clone it down, and then you need this, that, and about 15 other things to run it. Where's my setup script? Where's the one click run and install? Where's the whatever it is, even if that's inside a company in private, because that's an onboarding thing. It speeds your developers up every time they blow their environment away and check it out, which let's face it, we do mess that up quite frequently. As does AI if you let it run amok. Much to that point, like that's also helpful for AI because AI will want to run tests or run the build or whatever the tooling there. And if it can't figure out how, and I shouldn't have to write a 50-page Claude MD or Cursor MD or whatever the current standard is to instruct all this. It should just be able to infer it from the tooling we've got and that the developers can use, honestly.
Yeah. Do you feel like, have you found a solution that helps in that area?
I will say again, I've been influenced by GitHub for better or worse. So when I joined, there was a Strap script, which is, if you go look on GitHub, it's actually open source public repo that Mike McQuaid built, who was also an engineer at GitHub for a long time. And he, I don't know whether he'd initially set that up within GitHub or somebody used it after he got hired or whatever, but you basically could run that. It would set your MacBook up, it would pull all the relevant repos, and it would get everything up and running. And it was way more complex than the one I've just put in place at Odin, but that was like, wow, cool. And I genuinely got the .com repo, which was and still is a monolith for the most part, up and running and something shipped in my first week at GitHub. And I don't have done that in hardly any other company. So that's kind of been sort of my motivation. So I've had I check in my system files now into a private repo so that I can rebuild my Macs quickly. And then, this was like, I want a setup script. I need to run Docker with these things. There has to be a database running, otherwise the back end doesn't work. I need to spin up the back end and the front end. And individually, all of these things do work locally, but it was just like, what do I run now and why and how? And so I walked through all of the stuff and built a script for that.
Oh, man. It's really interesting. So actually, one of the sort of mutual relationships I know we chatted about was Fimeo and like Emoju and what they're building over there. So anyone, it's Fimeo, FIMIO.xyz. And so when I was able to help them, they were sort of working through kind of their like product market fit, right? Like big visions, beautiful, potential solutions, right? Where do we take that? And so I'm not sure where they are now today. It's been, a hot minute since I caught up with them. But that was something that I felt was really promising in Vimeo, is that if you could just bring that GitHub repo in, and it would just collect and dump all of your dependencies, everything that was going on. And so I really did see that as something that could have been, again, not sure where they are today. Maybe they've already reached this point, right? But something that could really come in and say, hey, this is everything that you need, and at least give you that output. So then you can bring that into, writing that script or whatever, and having sort of a start state. So again, unsure, but I think there's something there with what they've built. And I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but curious what you think if you have.
They're doing kind of builds for AI related stuff at the minute. So it is still
Yep.
that, but yeah, and I think it's going to be repo and project dependent. Honestly,
Yes.
I don't. Yeah, but yeah, just putting even half a day of effort into making it easy or easier, I think pays off. Honestly, it pays off my own sanity, because there was a lot of swear words going on my computer before I read the script.
Okay, so this is super funny. I try not to curse, due to my faith, but when when I am doing something with code, my husband always knows. He's like, "You just dropped an F-bomb. Are you coding?" I was like, "Shut up. How do you know?" Because it's like the only time I swear.
Yeah, it definitely triggers that reaction.
Yes, yes, it does.
Code, and sometimes it's at myself, like, why did you do that?
Exactly, and it's usually more than I'm swearing at myself, like, "You idiot, why did you do that?" But, it's the verbal venting of the frustrations of the situation.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, let's talk about Sale House. I would love to talk about, sort of like your involvement, what y'all are building. I think there's, definitely something cool. When you and I were talking in the pre-show, you, with a very bright smile on your face, was excited about going back and like actually writing more code and doing that, with AI solutions. So I would just love to hear all about that and what you're doing and what you want to share.
Yeah, I am. Uh, I'm genuinely surprised myself, honestly, because when I was at Notify, it was a very, very full-on job. There was a lot going on. I had a lot of people rolling up to me and everything. And so Ed had started working on Sale House, and it was something that I was kind of advising-ish on. So we had chats about it, but I wasn't deeply involved.
Mm-hmm.
And the original premise was around solving event-based stuff, but without needing to worry about the heavyweight Kafka or paying money
Mm,
for queuing systems or whatever. But what kind of happened at the start of the year was we met up for just a beer, just how friends do of an evening, and a chat. And we got talking about it more. And at this point, I'd already started being like, some of this AI stuff's really interesting. This feels like the dot-com boom. It feels like the mobile boom again. And I just put a piece out about that, actually. But it genuinely feels like that to me. And that's when I'm like, I really want to kind of do this. So we had a conversation, and we've kind of jumped in. But also I'm like, why would I use Sale House?
mm,
Then we were both talking about a bunch of use cases. And actually, we have now built what we really wanted.
ooh,
Which is more like a control plane, if you like. So one of my
mm,
personal frustrations with some of the workflow tools out there is either I've got to run all my code in your system, which I'm not anti doing, but when you've got legacy systems as well is unrealistic.
yeah.
And then that's me with my VPN channel. um, or there are these UIs where you draw out the flows. And again, I'm a developer. I don't draw these things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, I maybe scratch on a bit of paper, but whatever. So I wanted to be able to dynamically send events off, which you can do, obviously, depending on what your code's doing, but also then dynamically respond to them or not. So there was already pull and push subscriptions, but we've got filters based on data values in there now. We've got rate limiting per subscription to stop thundering herds and things, like if your LLM AWOL and starts triggering events because you've made a call and got some stuff back and it's failing evaluations all the time, you need to handle that situation. You do need to orchestrate if you've got multiple services running, be they agents or old-fashioned services or even monolith. It's monolith.
Old-fashioned.
Honestly, there's a communication, the event-based. And for me, I'd really kind of leaned in on the event-based architectures when I was at GitHub, because again, at scale, it needed that to operate. There's all the webhooks, obviously, that fly around that everybody knows about at GitHub, but I mean, the scale of that is phenomenal. Plus all the data, everything happening on the platform and everything happening at the Git layer. I mean, they make massive use of Kafka, and Sailhouse would not be a good fit for that. That's not what we're trying to solve for. But for most people who just need some events flying around for a few things, there wasn't anything super quick and easy. And then also, I know there's LangChain out there now. It's just like doing some of this in code, but neither of us are Python programmers. We're like anything but Python almost. So we were like, yeah, we want it to be Go and TypeScript, and you can run something on Netlify or on Vercel or even a Cloudflare worker and still use Sailhouse. Use it with your monolith on your server, and have them all talk to each other in ways that if you're just on one platform, it can't do. So yeah, it's basically event-driven infrastructure, but working as a control plane within your code. So it is purely developer-led, and it's not trying to enable the next founder who knows no code to build anything. But it's also like, yeah, there's a lot of coding tools out there. Yes, there's a lot of agent stuff. Yes, you're going to be building agents, but who's going to help you figure out how they work with each other in your existing systems?
Yes, yes. Oh, that's super exciting. So you shifted from that advisory space though now. So what are you up to and sort of what's your role today?
Officially, I'm CTO and Ed's CEO. He's definitely better at the raw sales side of things than I am. I know my limitations, but I'm doing some of the DevRel side of things because, again, this is how we originally started talking a long while back. And we're both doing the coding still because he is still technical, even despite the titles. So yeah, we're both shipping enhancements in production Go that runs at the edge and then on a centralized server as well. And then we've got SDKs in various languages, which we've got Go, Rust, Python, TypeScript, Swift, and Kotlin at the moment.
Ooh, power hitters.
Yeah, another use case that I think this is valuable for is some of the work I did in agencies back in the day was with mobile apps, and they're a different beast because the network isn't always there. And I can definitely see the value of events and pull subscriptions more than push ones. I know there's the push notifications and all of that, but I can see the value in that, and that's why I'm like, I'm just gonna get push these out there as well, because I can see me in the past using these if this has existed. And we've got kind of discrete use cases in a minute, but yeah.
That is super cool. Well, similar to what we talked about, right? Like your ability to identify and build the right SDKs that are going to be to the use cases of the actual pain points, right? Like that's a whole bunch of good business stuff, but also you as like a great engineer being able to come in and like see that and see gaps and bring your experience in. And so similar to what we were talking about in the pre-show, right? Like it seems like developers are this like hard audience to market to and this hard audience to build businesses for in some cases, but it sounds like the two of you are doing it like just swimmingly, because it's what it's about, right, is like actually giving a crap. And this is what I said in the pre-show. And when you do that, it's because you actually care about their problems. You care about how you're going to solve them. You care about what that moment, the F word moments, right? Like you care about the F word moments and you're like, how do I take those off of your plate? And so it's really cool to hear that, like pulling together SDKs at that level, right? And that many of them varying in the ecosystem to be able to play to that. And I think it's powerful when a company of what you're building can sort of see and understand like what developers want and be able to deliver that to them.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you can use the raw API if you want to, but one of the things I've always enjoyed with good SDKs, of which there are not as many as I would like out there, and I do have opinions because what I worked on at GitHub was the API, is they solve problems for me. So I don't have to do the retries because the SDK does that for me, for example. That's a really common one. But one of the things we haven't released yet, but we have a PR that we're playing around with. We always start in the TypeScript one because that's where we're most familiar and can easily write scripts to test it, but actually putting the subscription logic in there. So if you wanted a long running job, that we can kind of handle that for you and things. So again, you can pay yourself if you want. We don't want to block that. We know some devs want to get right in there and fiddle with it all, but we also want that time to get up and running to be really short and easy for people. And yeah, you're right about selling to developers. And as I said to you pre-show, I think CTOs and VP engineering are a special breed of that, because we don't respond in the same way that other senior leaders respond to sales outreach. We want facts and we want truth and we want preciseness. We don't want the hype necessarily.
Yep.
Yeah, we obviously have to lean into certain keywords on websites and like everybody else does, but to then come and go, look, here's a snippet of code. Here's how it's going to solve your problem. You have this, we've got a section on the website, use cases, so that you can look at it from that angle, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's leaning into those things. And I loved how you said it, actually. It comes back to, you have to care. Because I saw a tweet just today, completely irrespective of me being on this podcast, but and I apologize because I cannot remember who it was. Like it was in my feed rather than somebody I particularly know, but they picked fault in the Gemini CLI, saying it's only a day old, but there's inconsistencies between dashes and underscores in the parameters. That's the stuff that devs do care about. That's what they will pick up on. Whereas like other like business people will be like, who cares about that? And I'm like, developers do. And then they here, and I'm like, oh, developers don't care about that.
Exactly. Exactly. And I fully agree. If anyone is like listening, like walk away with that sentiment, right? Of like the engineering people deeply care about things that are so different. Like you said, they don't care about the hype. They don't care about some of the other stuff, but they absolutely care about how they're getting started and reaching that meaningful time to value, right?
Yeah, definitely. Because most of us actually do a lot of playing. I mean, even those of us older, later in career, might have other obligations, personal obligations outside of work. We still usually find time to have a bit of a play around with what's latest, because that's why you're in the field for most of us.
Yep.
Yeah, and we don't have a lot of time to spare, so the quicker we can try something out, the better.
Yes, exactly. I feel like that also plays into sort of like the self-serve side of things. And I shouldn't say sort of, it absolutely does, right? When there is, lately, I don't remember where the post was or how it all started, but I had addressed some posts, and it still keeps lingering where it comes back in my LinkedIn notifications because it's still getting traction. But it's this idea, right, of like, if you've got book a demo, like you're not going to bring developers, technical leaders. I'm just going
to I, as a VP of engineering, I'm not going to reach out to you.
Yes. If it is a site that says book a demo, what would be the parameters at which that you would consider making an exception?
Oh, I really am not sure, because if I can't at least log in and have a look, and or I can't see the pricing, I don't know if it's in my budget. Because that's the other angle that the leadership brings, is like, I have to care about COGS. I have to care about, sorry, for those listening, cost of goods sold. So how much we're spending delivering the services that we put out as a company. So if you've given me no indication of pricing, you could be really affordable and great, or you could be really expensive. And I'm going to assume the latter because you don't want to write it down. Like, even if I look at a website and it says $500 a month, if that's $500 of value and it's saving me $2,000, then there's still a positive trade-off there if we've got the budget. But for something where I don't know, so honestly, I'm really not sure, because it would have to be a tool that there was no other way of getting anything that did that with no self-serve option. That would have to be, honestly, be the only way.
Mic drop. That was amazing. That's exactly true. And it's just, sometimes it's the things of like, we try to preach and we try to talk about it, and right, we've talked about it on the show, right? Being able to, instill knowledge to the business side of things, but seeing it on the technical side or seeing it on the user side. And it's just, it's so accurately true that I'm like, yes, VP of engineering saying this out loud, take this to heart, because it really does matter. For what I have witnessed, and I'm curious to hear how you think about this, is that the only time when I think I've seen developers be like, okay, fine, I'll look past that, is if the documentation is really well done and you can very clearly see how that product is potentially solving your problem. If it's keen and you can and actually potentially see, yes, this is not what I've tried before. This is potentially a better solution. This could potentially save me time. Then they have optionally, and not in all cases, considered booking a demo once they've been able to verify that with documentation.
I'd say with my engineer's hat on, that's a maybe. With my day job hat on, my VPN, I don't have that time. I don't have time to go find that
Boom.
information.
Boom. Oh
I
my
need,
gosh, I love that.
I'm hiring at the minute, which is great, but there's obviously interviews. There's the keeping the team running. There's the strategic stuff with the founders. I'm also involved in hiring other leaders at the business. There's a lot of things in my daytime and my own time is going to be used for fun stuff, like playing with AI tools, rather than like, can I read the documentation of this project?
Yes. Oh, thank you for that answer. So beautiful. I'm going to snippet this all out because this is just the most lucrative and amazing insights for these developer product companies to truly understand that like self-serve is like an absolute must. You have to get your hands on it. You have to be able to see how it works. Try it out for yourself, but on top of that, absolutely need to see pricing, right? Because if it's outside of your pricing, there's no sense in even investing any time into it.
Yeah, and I also understand from the other side of it, because as a senior leader, I've been in sales, not sales calls with prospects, but with the sales team and looking at numbers.
For sure.
These salespeople have to commit to these numbers, and all I'm doing is being a drag on them if I'm not going to buy. So it does actually
Exactly.
help the other part of the business, but I mean,
Yes.
if
Yeah.
someone's wavering, absolutely get on a call and work with them. I had a great call actually with a supplier yesterday who we may or may not be using, because they explained stuff to me, and I opted into. But they have a thing on their website that I can sign in on and sign up on. I
Mm.
have more information, but that was me being proactive.
Yep. Oh, I love that. Amazing, amazing insights. Okay, so before we wrap up and end the show, I want to ask some of the sort of like lingering questions that, a lot of, I would say probably more like the junior engineers watching or sort of earlier stage engineers really like to hear about. And that's sort of like, what's your favorite tool stack? What's your, favorite programming stack? What are, you said you were kind of diving in and using AI a little bit more. So maybe there's something that's, in your
Yeah,
day to day that you're enjoying doing more. But anyways, I'm going to leave it at that and let you share what you want.
cool. Such a blank canvas.
It is.
I've been using JavaScript since before TypeScript existed and
Mm,
before jQuery existed. So make of that what you will. But I like
that.
modern JavaScript. I think it's a good language now. It definitely used to have a lot of foot guns. But that made me employable for a bit because I knew what they were. So I think that's really useful, and I don't believe you can build big applications purely on serverless because
Sure.
of state and things, but they're great for small scripts and small things on websites and proxies and things like that. Go play with them.
Mhm.
So on the free accounts on Netlify or wherever. I do still have a soft spot for Ruby on Rails. I am not going to lie. It's been a couple of great jobs for me. But I just haven't really had much cause to use it of late.
Mm.
And actually, I'm really beginning to enjoy Go. I definitely was a bit at first. But yeah, I've gotten into it now, and I've kind of figured it out and got comfortable with its Goisms, shall we say. It reminds me a bit of Objective-C, not
Mm.
syntax, but in you have to think about memory a bit more. Back before
Sure.
there was, because again, when I started doing iOS stuff, I was on Objective-C with free. They still had the free call in there. There was pre-memory management. I mean, I know Go's not quite there, but you're kind of having to think more at that level, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's good programming. In terms of tooling, I've been a VS Code user for a long while. So obviously I tried out Cursor, given their shared history, shall we say.
Yep.
But the thing that's really, really, really blown me away in terms of accuracy of what it produces, not being an idiot, not deleting the production database, which I've made one AI tool do, not real prod in either the side project or production, but effectively doing that. Yeah, the schema matches. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll delete the database. And it went and did it. Was with Claude Code. Honestly, there's something in Claude Code that is different to using those same models in any of the other editors that really blows my mind away.
Interesting. Okay, so I've never used Claude for writing code, but I've used Cursor. I use some of the other tools that mostly just do it for you.
Yeah.
What do you think? So with Claude Code, tell me about sort of your workflow, right? Because like, are you having to copy paste out, or like I haven't used it for code, so does it like
No,
integrate in, or how? Yeah,
well,
tell
because
me
it
about
is terminal, when it first came out, everything was in the terminal. What it do
it.
is
Yep.
you're having a conversation with it. It is a curses app, so it has some kind of UI in quotes,
Mm,
UI like we used to have years ago. Um, and what it would do was give you the diffs.
mm,
Look at it. So that kind of worked. But what I then used to do was have VS Code open on the side because it's changing the local file system so I can see what's doing there. But what they've recently released is an IDE hook. So you can actually run
mm.
code, the terminal app with inside VS Code, which is what my workflow is now. And I love it because I am visual and I want to compare the files sometimes, not
Mhm.
necessarily at a diff level, but just go, okay, if I make that diff change here and I know it's going to affect that file, and I know it's me doing some of the AI work, but I'm still an engineer and I have to understand what's going on. So that's for me has been the killer combo recently.
I am going to try that because honestly, it sounds like you and I have very similar mindsets here. And it probably goes back to what I had said originally of wanting to understand my entire stack of architecture, right? Is like Cursor and some of those other tools, which can be mind blowing, but just do things. And I'm like, wait, what just happened? Like,
Yeah,
okay, so I understand what's going on. What just happened? And it sounds like that would be a more enjoyable experience for me, so both I can learn, right, and expand upon resharpening those skills, but also like be able to understand, because like you said, I just want to know what's going on, and I'm the same way in terms of visual, just making sure that I can see where it's all landing.
yeah, yeah, definitely recommend that for folks.
All right, all right. Well, that's an amazing tip. Okay, so this has been so lovely. Very, very enjoyable conversation. I hope you and I get the chance to talk more again. It sounds like we have a lot of similarities. Where can folks find you? And you said that you had just recently written an article. So maybe if you would like to share if you have a blog or where you posted that, or just
Yeah,
generally where people can find you.
if you go to sailhouse.dev, that's where I'm posting my articles in the blog section on there on the menu. If
Love
you
that.
want to find me, I'm KRider2010 on all of the socials that I'm on. I'm mostly on Blue Sky and X/Twitter of those. And yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me by searching for my real name, I'm pretty sure. Please do let me know why you're connecting though, because I get a lot of requests and I don't always accept them all. Just putting that out there. Yeah,
Amazing human. Lay the space of who you are. I love that.
yeah.
Amazing. All right. Well, before we officially wrap up, any final words? One thing I do want to call out is your believe sign, and I'm sure others have seen it too.
There's
Um, I would.
merchant stickers.
I love it. I was so inspired by that, like first season, and we talked about it in the pre-show, right? But it's just I think that positive mentality is just something that we like really truly need in the world, even more so today. And so your background it's just beautiful.
Yeah, and I actually got that in the States when I was visiting Universal. But yeah, I was just like, I have to have that. I know it's a US license plate, but I'm having that for my wall.
Who cares? It's all
Yeah.
good. Uh, well, this has been fabulous. I hope that you have a fabulous rest of your Thursday, an amazing weekend, and I hope we get to chat soon.
Yeah, it's been a huge pleasure. Thank you.
Of course. Bye, everyone.